kind of a sloping lowland built on glacial moraines and clays and so on. And during the earthquake, a particular geologic unit known as the Bootlegger Cove clay proved to be very susceptible to shaking and to failure, you might say, probably as a result of a kind of an internal collapse of the fabric of the clay. But what this meant was that where that part of the town near the bluffs where the clay was exposed began to slump. The ground began to slump in particularly favorable areas, and it kind of calved back as the earthquake proceeded in a series of landslides. There were at least 5 major landslides. The 4th Avenue slide, of course, was right downtown and destroyed much of the main street and main area of the city.
When the quake struck, one couple found themselves right in the heart of downtown. And here today, they describe what they experienced.
We went out onto the street, and it was on 4th Avenue, which was then really the main street of Anchorage. And there was a bar across the street that slipped in as the street in front of us went right down as we looked at it. I mean, we're standing here, and the street went zoom. The next block fell in. The bar slid into the empty hole, and I to this day believe I heard the tinkling of the glass of all the bar glasses going. No one was even hurt in there. It was incredible.
I heard those at the time.
Yeah.
And right across the street there was an old building, and it was then a hotel, a very small hotel, and it just slid back into the crevasse that had been created. All this was occurring very slowly, and at the same time there was a very eerie quality about it because it was silent. And the telephone poles along the street were falling one by one, and a fat man in a Hawaiian shirt ran out on a March day in Anchorage, Alaska, with the telephone poles falling, holding on to a shaking parking meter.
Don't go away. Spirit of Survival will be right back.
You're watching.
As the 64 Alaskan earthquake rages on, Tay Thomas and her 2 children become trapped on a piece of frozen terrain that once was their yard.
All of a sudden, this black line snaked across the white snow between me and Anne. And that, I think, probably brought more fear than anything. And I grabbed her and pulled her against me. And in the next second, I discovered we were on a piece of ground that was not much bigger than a dining room table. And at that point, I realized that our whole yard was breaking up in these great frozen chunks of ground. And then I felt a moving feeling. It was kind of like being on a Ferris wheel, only going backwards down toward the water. And the children's swing just sort of drifted by on its own little block of earth. And then my greenhouse drifted by, and there wasn't a pane of glass broken. It just sort of went cheerily along. It was so awesome. I thought, well, this is the end of the world. This is it. And actually, at that moment, I looked up into the sky thinking, well, God will be with me at the end of the world. And I looked up and expected to see him in the sky. And then in the very next second, I felt this intense sense of peace lying there in the middle of all this great turmoil.
And I found I was in a crevasse that had opened here, and I was falling into darkness. And that's the one time I wondered if this is the end. And I hit the bottom, and I landed on soft sand. I wasn't hurt. And then the crevasse, instead of closing, kept opening up. And it elongated until my neighbor's house, it looked like it was coming down in toward me. And I had to get out of there. Well, then I discovered that I was half buried. One side of me was buried, and I had to scramble to stay on top of this stuff. And I couldn't move because I had that trumpet in my hand yet. And I had to deliberately let go of the trumpet. And I remember how reluctantly I did it. It's the last thing I owned that I had. And then I scrambled and stayed on top.
And at one point, I saw my neighbor's house, or what was left of it. There was nothing but the car, and there were 2 children sitting on the car, and they called to me. And And that was a very, very difficult decision. I thought, what am I going to do? I'm carrying one child, I'm hauling the other, and these two kids want help. And so I called to them and I said, stay on top of the car, I will get you help. Well, later it turned out that there were some men that came down the cliff right behind me and picked those two children up. But that family lost two other children. Two children died and they never found them.
But perhaps the most destructive consequence of an earthquake when it occurs near a large body of water is the tsunami or tidal wave. Alaska's coastal mountains and narrow inlets were what made the huge waves produced by the Good Friday Quake especially deadly, as tsunami expert George Carté explains.
Communities such as Valdez, Seward, Chenega were all heavily damaged by a local tsunami that was caused by slides within their local bays and harbors. Kodiak and again Seward were also damaged by a tsunami that was generated in the Gulf of Alaska, caused by an uplift of the floor of the ocean. A tsunami is not a single wave either. It's a series of waves, like throwing a pebble in a pond will generate a series of ripples. In some bays and harbors, they literally get trapped in the bay and will oscillate back and forth for quite a few hours and be dangerous for a long time.
One place where a local tsunami wrought particular damage was on the native island of Chenega in Prince William Sound, where only the schoolhouse was left standing, shown here in 1964, shortly after the incident. Of the 76 Chugach Indian inhabitants of Chenega, nearly a third would not survive the earthquake. Afterward, the Chenega people were moved to a new island, one deemed less susceptible by the U.S. government to the phenomenon of local tsunamis. Recently, a group of elders from the tribe returned to their ancestral island of Chenega. In the 19th century, the Chenega people were converted by Russian settlers in the area to the Russian Orthodox religion, which accounts for the prevalence of Russian surnames in the tribe.
15-foot tide used to go over the bulkhead up there. Dock.
In their traditional beliefs, however, they show a deep, abiding respect for the sea, for its power to provide, and also for its power to destroy. Here they share their stories and their pain, so that they not be forgotten.
The flood tide started coming in and going back out. And after that, I look out the bay, I could see a big wall of water right out there in the middle of the bay, just coming in. And yeah, I knew there was a tidal wave. I said, oh my gosh, tidal wave. I grabbed my wife. We started running for higher ground. I could hear the wave, behind me, but I didn't see it. I blacked out. I don't know how long I blacked out, but when I come to, I was behind the building, behind that storage shack they had up there, hanging on to one corner with my one hand, trying to reach my wife with the other hand stretched out like that. Just barely got her. Hang on to her. And my house started to lift and started to drift towards us. It wasn't too far from us. Probably from here to the rock down there. And I remember I blacked out, I don't know how long, probably a few seconds. When I woke up, I had my two boys around their heads like that, and I felt like I was standing on pretty solid. I didn't think I was sick, or before I noticed, the water was here, down to here, down to nothing. So I told my boys, okay, run. Run for the higher ground. They ran like a scared deer. You can't see him no more.
We'll return in a moment.
Night in the schoolhouse where it'll be a little bit warmer. This is March month. Still had a lot of snow. I can remember when we walked into the school, my older sister, I think she was in shock. And And I still didn't know where my husband and 3 kids and 3 girls were. And somehow that, I guess I don't know, we've just bypassed each other somehow. And I noticed he just had our youngest girl. I'll never forget that night, how we had to huddle around each other up on the hillside, trying to keep each other warm. Worried because we could feel the aftershocks. We're just worried that there might be another bigger wave coming in. We didn't know. It was really a bad experience. It's hard. It brings back sad memories. The schoolhouse up there where I went to school. How much it's grown. All these trees, you can tell how long we've been gone from here. And it seemed like a big village to me then. Now it's... Where were our houses? How come it looks so small here?
Ironically, the Chenega built their village on the shoreline for better protection, placing the community in an open area with an excellent view of the surrounding waters and rival tribes. But there was no protection from the sea itself when it rose up in anger as a result of the '64 quake. Tsunamis cause extensive death and destruction. They are responsible for 119 of the 131 fatalities attributed to the Good Friday Quake. At Seward, the Alaskan Railroad is wiped out. And at Valdez, a local tsunami kills 31 people and destroys the town's waterfront. Former Mayor John Kelsey describes the devastation.
As the land slid into the ocean, which was about 800 feet deep off of the dock somewhat, it took the docks, totally destroyed them, took all our longshoremen that were working, and it just totally buried them in the debris, and I think we only found 2 bodies afterwards. Some of the fishing boats that were in the small boat harbor were washed up by action of the tsunami or the wave action coming back in and washed it up onto the higher area.
Back in Anchorage, people climb out of hiding places to assess the damage and assist others still trapped.
By the time I got out, I went and found my wife. She'd gone to a neighbor's house, and we stayed a week without being invited. And because the power was off, my neighbor's choice cuts and all his fine game and everything was thawing, so we had to eat it. And my wife had a trunk of her car full of champagne for a party we were planning on Sunday. So we had champagne and fine wild game, but if we wanted a glass of water, we had to go out and get a bucket of snow and come in and melt it.
And we walked along the 4th Avenue, the main street, and there were only 2 lights on. One was on the top of a radio tower, and the light was on, and the other one was in front of a store down by the theater, and it was for a travel agent, and it was a blinking sign, and it was blinking
travel. People have always said real estate is a permanent investment. That's where you should put your money and it'll be there forever. And here, and I stood on real estate and watched it disappear. So to me, real estate wasn't a permanent thing. And when we fished over the ruins of the house, what did my wife want me to find? The family albums. One of the things you joke about, you bore people with. I said, don't you want some jewelry and fur coats? She said, oh, get the family albums. And other things of that nature that have a meaning more than just the material value.
And yet, on the island of Chenega, the loss is measured in still different terms, even today.
I lost a sister and 3 of her kids, a brother-in-law and his little girl, plus my 2 girls, 2 of my uncles and their wives. I could go on. It was really sad knowing how many we lost.
In ancient times, the Chenega buried a person where he died, often far from his village. The '64 quake not only swept the dead away, but the entire community. In contrast, Alaska's cities were rebuilt using technologies that guarantee against anything but the worst disaster, such as the Good Friday Quake of 1964.
Coming up next, Americans pay a stiff price for the Gulf War victory on fields of armor. Then powerful, hungry big cats use both their jaws and claws to kill on hunters. Explore your world on the Discovery Channel.